Hi, and welcome to episode 81 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. My name's Niina, also known as Give Me a Crown across the internet, and today is Friday the 20th of April 2018. I'm coming to you from the Central Tablelands in the central west of New South Wales in Australia, and it's lovely to have your company. I don't have a huge amount to share with you this week. I have one work in progress. I've been very monogamous, so I thought that I would go and raid my sock drawer and show off some of the socks that I've worked on in the past and chat a bit about how they've worn and all that kind of jazz. So before we get into that, I thought that I would show you my Caradon Hill jumper. This is a free pattern by Blacker Yarns. I'm not using Blacker Yarns. I'm using Morris & Sons Estate 8-ply in the Rustic Aubergine colourway. I am currently up to the yoke. Last time I was working on the sleeves and I've since joined up the sleeves. There are some stitches being held at the armpits which will be sewn up later, but it's almost done. Very, very almost done. So I have been posting on Instagram about my stresses about running out of yarn. I have been very, very worried ever since I started this project. I'd sort of done the calculations and it was meant to be right, but I sort of went into a bit more detail about that last time, about why I was a bit worried. And I ended up unravelling the swatch that I had knit, but I had this niggling feeling that there must be one more ball of yarn out there somewhere. And I found it. It had been the one that I showed the squishing technique on last time, and I had set it aside on the table and it had stayed there, and other things had sort of congregated around it and I'd walked past and missed it, but I found it and I've got that much left, so I should be completely okay. I'm working on some short rows at the moment to shape the neck, and then it's just a small sort of collar of some sort. I think it's just a rolling down sort of collar, and then it will be done. So I think I'm going to be alright, and I'm glad I didn't find this yarn ball until now, because otherwise I probably would have knit the body just a little bit longer and then I'm pretty sure I would have run out of yarn. So it will be a slightly shorter length jumper than a lot of my jumpers have been in recent times, but I think that's going to be a good addition to my wardrobe, just to have something that stops at the hips rather than going further down, and then I shouldn't have any problems with awkward length tops that I have done recently. I am really happy with how it's coming together. I can't wait to finish it up and block it, but I've got a little bit more to go. The short rows that I started on last night are a bit of a nightmare because I'm working on the reverse, and I don't think I've ever knit cables on the reverse, so I'm just having to switch my brain over about what stitches are passing over where, and thinking about the pattern in reverse, reading my stitches and referring to the pattern or the charts, and having done so much of the knitting on the right side, having to do the wrong side stitching is a bit weird. Now, this is a free pattern, and so as such, I don't think there's really the expectation that it covers absolutely every detail about how you knit a jumper. I have worked with paid patterns before that have had a fair bit of detail about how to sort of decrease and work your cables at the same time. This one doesn't sort of go into that, but what I'm essentially doing is that once I've got, when I don't have enough stitches to complete a cable, I just knit stockinette, and then it sort of fades into the raglan decreases at the sleeve or at the shoulder. What I got stuck on last night before I decided to put this down and go to bed was that the stitch count is a little bit different in a few different places, and in one spot I was able to do a cable, but on the opposite side I wasn't, and I think it would look odd it would possibly look unbalanced if there's a cable happening over here and not over here. So I think I'm going to have to go backwards in reverse, or on the reverse side, and decide that I'm just not going to do the cable, even though I've got enough stitches to do that. Again, that's not something that's mentioned in the pattern, but something to be aware of if you're knitting this is just to sort of check, once you are decreasing for the shoulders, that you have enough stitches on both sides of the shoulders to do your cables. It's only off by one stitch, but that stitch makes a bit of a difference. But yeah, so not too far to go. I have been pretty much alternating yarn balls all the way through, where I sort of did one row with one yarn ball, with the old yarn ball, one with the new. Did that a couple of times before switching over. But as I got up here, I got a little bit lazy and I've just been joining the yarn balls wherever, because I've been so worried about running out of yarn. But I don't think you can tell where the yarn balls are switched at all, so I probably didn't need to worry about that anywhere. Did I mention that this is Morris & Sons Estate 8-ply in the rustic aubergine colourway? I've knit with this yarn before in the 4-ply version and had no issues with the colours or anything like that in the same dye lot, so I kind of knew that it would be okay. But yeah, sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry, but in this case I didn't need to have worried. Throughout the whole thing, I've only stuffed up one cable so far. I might stuff some more up as I do these short rows, but I sort of picked it up a few rows later when I realised that the cable was going the wrong way and had to drop down a few rows for those cables, switch it around, and it's not something that's particularly fun to do, but it's not that hard. So if you are just sort of getting into cables and you make a mistake with a cable, don't panic. There's lots of good tutorials online about how to drop down those stitches and fix up a cable and put it going in the right direction. So yeah, I think by next episode, which should be towards the start of May, I will have this finished and I'll be happily wearing it. I can't wait to block it. I think it's going to just relax a fair bit and it's going to be so snuggly and warm. So can't wait to share that with you once I get it finished. I also had another revelation with my circa counter. So one downside is that if you're trying to do the same number of repeats with in two different sections, then you can't sort of put two of these indicators on the same number. So what I've done is I've put one on the 6 and one on the 12 because I'm doing two different things for 6 repeats, and I'm just going to try to remember that this blue one is just being moved between the 7 and the 12 to count 6 repeats, and this yellow one is going between the 1 and the 6. If you've never used a circa counter or haven't watched last episode, that will make no sense, but hopefully if somebody's thinking about getting a circa counter, they'll realise that, yeah, if you're trying to keep track of two things that have the same number of repeats, it's a little bit fiddly. I could just mental note that the yellow indicates the blue and the yellow and just use both of them in this range, but I think that I would probably stuff that up, so I'm just trying it this way and we'll see how it goes. And just a reminder for the spinners out there, we have a spin along, a very casual sort of spin along of 50 grams of yarn running up until the end of April. So if you have been doing some spinning in the last few months, then please pop by the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group and check out if you're eligible to enter. There is a prize of a braid of fibre from Skein, and I will be drawing that at the start of May. So good luck if you choose to enter. So I thought that I would go through my sock drawer and pull out some socks and show you how they've sort of worn and some thoughts on them after they've been in use. So I've popped them all in a box and that's how they look. So I wasn't able to find all of my socks. There's a few pairs that have seemed to have vanished into thin air, and there's also quite a few socks that I've knit during this podcast that I have given away as gifts, so I can't share those, but let's have a look at what's in the box. there's some socks in here that, if you're a long-time viewer, you might have never seen. Because I don't think I've ever shared my first pair of socks. This was my first pair of socks. These were knit with Regia yarn, and I probably need my sock blockers. Ta-da! Sock blockers. So these were my first pair of socks. They were knit with some Regia yarn. I didn't really understand too much about socks or gauge or all sorts of things at that stage. I was for some reason using a pattern that suggested 3.5mm needles. I could only find 3.25mm needles, so I used those. These days I use 2.25mm needles, so there's a fair bit of difference. And you can see that my stitches are pretty big. You'll also see that I have fairly significant holes just there at the heel turn. So at that stage I didn't really understand much about knitting socks, but I gave it a whirl and I was really happy with how they turned out. But I also started to understand some of the ins and outs of knitting socks. These get a fair bit of wear and they've held up pretty well. I like them because they've got the shorter cuff. At the time I was just knitting a short cuff because I was just wanting to get into the guts of knitting a sock and understand how it all worked. But I really actually like that length for just sort of general pottering around. So that's my first pair. My second pair actually went to my grandmother, and I knit those. I ended up getting some thicker yarn, and I think I still use the 3.25mm needles, and the gauge turned out much better. And I think I've managed to figure out the sort of ins and outs of getting that heel turn nice and snug. My third pair of socks were these. These were another Regia ball of yarn. I picked up some 2.5mm needles when I went to Dubai on my way to Finland, and in Finland, in Helsinki, I picked up this Regia ball of yarn and I knit on this as I was travelling around. So this was in 2014, in around March, and my first pair of socks had been in February, so that's what, 4 years ago now. And these have also worn pretty well. I don't de-pill my socks, so you'll see that there's lots and lots of little fuzzy bits on them. It's what happens. Since I've moved out to the countryside, I wear woolly socks a lot, and in the winter, as soon as it starts getting colder, I tend to wear doubled up pairs of socks. So I'll have a fingering weight pair of socks as well as a thicker pair of socks. I'll shove all of those into boots when I go outside, so they get significant wear. But the heel has worn really, really well in these socks. So yeah, these are a particularly special pair of socks for me, because I remember sitting on trains going around Finland and knitting on these, and it was just a very special time and a very special visit. This next pair of socks was knit in May 2014 after I got back from Finland. These were knit with some Novita Veljestä yarn from Finland, which is a very thick, I think it's a worsted weight sort of sock yarn, merino or wool nylon blend. I don't think it's merino. They are very, very pilly, but they have worn really, really well. These are very often on my feet. I pop my fingering weight socks underneath them, and the heels have sort of become very felted. They're a little bit tough. They kind of, I think the amount of nylon in there just sort of, it must melt underneath my my heels or something, or maybe that's just the felting process, but It definitely feels a bit tough at the heel. The toes are more sort of flexible, but they have, I know they're looking a bit scruffy, but I also like them because, I don't know, they just make me happy. So in May 2014, I was looking for some yarn in Australia that would be thicker for socks, and I just couldn't find any with nylon in it. So I ended up using this pure wool from Morris & Sons, knowing full well that it would felt and would not hold up like the Novita yarn had. They haven't had a bit of wear for a while because there are some holes. So I've managed to get some holes in these. I think probably only on that foot, but yeah, I need to do some repair work, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So they haven't had much wear recently since I noticed that the holes were forming, but I'll repair those at some stage. These ones have only ever been hand washed, and they've peeled a little bit, not too bad though. But yeah, pure wool will make holes if you wear them like I do. Now this next one, I can't find its buddy. It's around here somewhere. This was knit in December 2014. I knit a fair amount of socks in between for gifts. This was my first ever toe-up sock and a Fish Lips Kiss heel. This was knit with Schoppel-Wolle Zauberball, and it was a yarn that I'd really wanted to try out for socks because I love the fun colours that the yarn comes in. I haven't knit too many toe-up socks since then. I'm very much a cuff-down sort of gal. I guess I learnt to knit socks top-down, and it just sort of works for me, so I don't do toe-up too often, but every now and then. I wear these ones a fair bit. I think I wear all of my socks a fair bit. Yeah, they just sort of go through on rotation, but they have peeled a bit, but still have held up pretty well. And I think I used 2.25mm needles on these for the first time. The next socks are some kind of wannabe zebra socks, and these are a bit of a fail. I wear them occasionally, so this is one pair that I don't wear all the time. It was a Finnish yarn from Novita, Veljestä. So I think this was just after I'd been to Finland again, and I loved the idea of the yarn of having zebra stripes, but the stripes just aren't that striking for me. I think my gauge was off. I think I'd started to tighten up my gauge with knitting, but these are loose, so I'm not too sure what I did. I think maybe I've got too many stitches on there, but the legs are just kind of floppy. I'm not too sure what's wrong with these socks, but yeah, don't wear them too often because they tend to just flop and fall down. Sometimes it happens. My next socks are my first hand spun socks. This was some fibre from Half Baked Hand Dyed, and it's just a wool yarn. I knew that I would be risking them felting, but because I had knit those Morris & Sons socks, I thought, yeah, they'll be okay. And they have definitely felted, but they felted in a fun way. So they've definitely felted on the bottom half where it rubs up against my shoe or my slippers or whatever I'm wearing, or the floor, and then the top part is a little bit less felted. But yeah, they're definitely not looking pretty, but they are super, super warm. So I love those socks, but they've definitely seen better days. I only hand wash these. I have a feeling it was a super wash wool, but I only hand wash them, but they just get a lot of punishment. My next pair of socks are super duper long. Oh well, I guess not really, but they're probably the longest socks that I've knit myself, and these are from Austermann Step, and They have definitely developed a fair amount of the sort of hard nylon melting kind of vibe in the heel. It definitely doesn't look pretty, but then the whole sock, I call these my crime scene socks because they look a bit like a crime scene. I wear these a lot, and overall, like, the legs look pretty good. It's just on the heel and a bit on the toe where the yarn has kind of gone a bit. But overall, still very wearable. Those ones were in May 2015 and these ones were June 2015. So just under 3 years ago. And these are my zigzagular socks. This yarn was from Ravelry, and these get so much wear, especially in the changing seasons in autumn and spring. These are fabulous. I don't know what exactly it is about them, but the feel of the yarn and the pattern on the foot and stitch count, I don't know, but I love wearing these. They just make me very, very happy. So, and they've got a little bit of wear on the bottom. Some of the colour has sort of come off a little bit from there, but again, I wear these pretty much year round, so they go through a lot of punishment, but the yarn itself has held up super, super well. So I think that the bit of colour that's gone there is probably just from it rubbing against other socks. We then get to July 2015, and I think it's around the time when I started this podcast, because I remember showing these socks on the podcast. These were knit from some leftover Regias. They're kind of wild, I know, but it was some experimenting that I was doing with combining different coloured yarns and a stitch pattern and colour work sort of things and what have you. Their heels, for some reason, have held up really, really poorly. They've got that same sort of plasticky feel that some of the Novitas have got. Not too sure why these heels have worn so much worse than the first couple of pairs of socks that I've ever knit. So, not too sure what's going on there, but it is what it is. They serve me well. They're not pretty, but I like them anyway. In September 2015, I knit these very colourful socks. They are the Leyburn pattern, and I knit them from Atelier Yarn. The yarn itself has held up really, really nicely. There's a little bit of scuffing at the heel and toe, but not much at all. But the legs on these socks are just wobbly. So I wear them, but they always sort of sit at my ankles, squished up. So I'm not too much of a fan of this Leyburn pattern. From memory, there's some, I can't even remember. There's some trickery that you do. It's not too hard, but it just doesn't create much stretch, so you cast on a lot more stitches than normal, and it just creates for a very wide leg, whereas I like a pretty sort of fitted sock. So love them because they make me very happy when I see them on my feet, but the pattern doesn't really suit my needs. In March 2016, I finished up these socks. These were basically a plain vanilla sock, except that I did some pearl bumps on the feet, and these took me quite a few months to complete because they were done while I was packing up in Sydney and moving over here. So they've got a lot of fond memories knitting on them as I was travelling backwards and forwards across the mountains. The yarn is a BFL sock yarn from Craftfulness, and it's held up super, super well. I really need to get myself some more BFL to knit socks with because these are super comfy and show very, very, very little wear. No sort of issues at the heels or anything like that. There's a little bit of discoloration, but that's just from popping them into boots all the time and what have you. But that's the colour from the boot rubbing off rather than anything to do with the yarn. So love the way that these have held up super, 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 super well. In October 2016, I knit these Rose City rollers. I sure have a lot of pink socks, don't I? I don't know what it is, but for some reason I seem to have just gravitated towards pink socks a lot. These were knit with Grundl Hot Socks Cotton Stretch. So it's a cotton elastin sort of blend, and they've held up really well. I don't wear them that often. They're a little bit too short for my sock liking, but I do wear them from time to time, and they don't pill. They just sort of wear pretty nicely, and they work well in summertime, popping them into shoes and or just pottering around at home. So yeah, not sure I would knit the Rose City rollers too many times. I would probably do one more pair just so that I have a pair out of a wool nylon blend, but overall I like my socks a little bit taller. But it was an interesting try to use this yarn, and I've been happily surprised that the elastin hasn't sort of dropped and made these socks misshapen or anything like that. It's an interesting blend. Next up, from October 2016, are my Echoes From Karelia socks. These were knit with a sort of a random combination of yarns that I picked up in Finland. I'm pretty sure that they are just wool yarns without any nylon, and I was just interested to see how they would wear and hold up, and I've been really pleasantly surprised about how well they sort of stayed together. There's a little bit of pilling on there, but overall they have held up well. These are hand wash only, so they don't get as much wear as my other socks tend to do. My hand wash socks they get washed, they get worn and then they get put in a pile to be washed, and it can take a little bit of time to get to that pile sometimes, whereas the other ones just get popped in the washing machine, and they're much quicker to launder that way. But I love these socks. They're cozy, they're warm, and I love the way that they look with the little cables on them and the colour work. Next up, we have some more hand spun socks, or the main body is hand spun, and then the toes, heels and cuffs are with a Finnish Novita Nalle yarn, and the hand spun is from fibre from Renanoli. It's a merino nylon blend, and these have worn very well. So these were knit up in February last year, so they haven't had as much wear as some of my other socks, but I have had no issue with them whatsoever. There's a little bit of fuzziness going on, but no major pilling or anything like that. I'm not sure how they would have worn at the heels and toes, but I'll never know. But the bottom of the foot feels very similar to the top of the foot, so I think they would have been completely fine had I knit the heels and toes with the same yarn. So very happy with those. And my final socks are these Miss Click Clack socks. So the yarn is Miss Click Clack Merry Creek sock, and the design is my own. It was for the Miss Click Clack sock block. I can't remember the name of it anymore, but I think it's coming up again. It's a knit along where you tricolour sock block KAL. So yeah, you use 3 colours of Miss Click Clack yarns to create some socks, and these were my entry last year, and I love these socks, and they've been wearing up very, very nicely. These get a lot of wear, so I love the way that the colours sort of play against each other on my feet, and they make me very, very happy and love this yarn. So that's all the socks that I had managed to gather together. As I said, there's a few others out there, but I will pop any links to the patterns down below on YouTube, or otherwise you can find them at givemeacrown.com/podcast, and I'll pop links to the yarns as well wherever I can find them. So overall, I seem to have managed to only wear holes in one pair of socks so far, which I think is pretty impressive. But I'm sure that there will be holes coming along soon. I do need to think about when's the right time to retire a pair of socks, when they're getting very, very pilly, but I don't know, there's something about just throwing on a pair of cozy socks that just makes me very happy. So I'd love to know if you ever retire pairs of socks. What's your reason for retiring them? Is it the way that they look, or the holes, or what have you? The only pair that I'm thinking about retiring at the moment is a zebra pair of socks, because they're not pretty. They don't feel comfy to wear necessarily, but I still hold on to them because I made them. So I do put them on, and I don't know, they function okay. So I'd love to know about your past socks, if you feel like sharing, either on YouTube in the comments or over at the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group. So apart from that, I think just a little bit of chatter at the end about life out here in the countryside. I've been getting back into photography a bit. I've been binging a little bit on YouTube, watching some tutorials and things, and photography is something that I used to do a lot of in Sydney. I would take photographs at gigs, and I would run around the city and take photographs, and I would go on holidays and take photographs, and I just loved using my camera. But since I came out here, I just haven't been using it quite so much. So I thought that I should get back into it, and I've been sort of just on my journeys, just stopping off in places and just trying to take a few photos and see what happens. I'm also sort of interested in videography, so I've been playing around with video and just trying to capture things, and it's a hugely different beast to photography, but it's a learning curve, and it's got to be hard at the start, and it gets easier as you go along. So at the end of this episode, I'll pop in a little video that I put together from Caradon, where I went for a walk the other week, and there are so many faults with the video. There's just so many. I can only tinker with it so much, because there are so many issues that I had when I actually filmed it, because it was an incredibly windy day. I didn't know what I was doing, and it's something though that by having done, I now know how to do better next time. I know how to move my camera a bit more. I know how to control the settings a bit more and all that kind of stuff. So it's a learning process, but I'll throw it in at the end anyway, just because I don't know, because I made it, and it'll be a nice reminder for me once I get a bit better at these sorts of things, that it'll remind me where I started from. I also did a bit of video as I was sewing, and I'll pop that over the top of this. It was while I was making a project bag, so I thought that I would capture it for use on my Etsy shop, so I've popped that over there as well if you want to have another look at it. It's rough, but it was something fun to do, and again, it's a starting point, and I know how to improve on it next time. So that one was filmed with my phone, whereas the one at Caradon was filmed with my digital SLR camera, and both of them have so many differences in regards to how to capture video and everything, but it's fun learning. I'm always wanting to learn, whether it's with knitting or gardening or photography and videography, so I encourage everyone, if you've got something that's niggling that you're wondering about, then check out YouTube and Google it or whatever, and you will find so much information. Some of it's wrong, some of it's right, but all of it will help you to gain knowledge and move forward with the things that you're passionate about. I've been pottering around in the garden and trying to get things sort of ready to plant for the autumn winter crops or something. Not that I really know what I'm doing, but there was some beautiful rain here yesterday which completely soaked the ground, and I was able to dig up the garden sort of beds that I had been using over the last few years and just sort of turn over the soil. I don't know if that's what you're meant to do, but it seemed like a good idea, and just sort of to loosen it up, and I'll be able to put some things growing in there over the weekend. I will be back towards the start of May in the first couple of days so that I can do the drawing for the spin along and share whatever else I've managed to create by then. Hopefully I'll have my Caradon hill jumper finished and I will be on to some new projects, or at least planning them. I'll probably be on to some new projects by then. And I'll have my spinning done because I'm just waiting to finish off my jumper first before I finish my spinning, so I'll have that done as well. But it was lovely to chat to you again and share my sock drawer as it currently stands. But I hope that you're enjoying all your crafts, and I'll see you soon.